So thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Crowd Conversations, which is our regular speaker series focused on building a circular construction economy in New York State. I'm Gretchen Worth. I'm the project director of the Susan Christopherson Center for Community Planning, which supports communities around New York State in their planning for a more equitable, climate resilient built environment. And the Christopherson Center is one of the founding partners of CROWD, which stands for Circularity, Reuse, and Zero Waste Development. And we organize Crowd Conversations. So tonight, we're going to be hearing from Dominic Gambaini. He's a founder of Cayuga Climate Action, and he's going to be talking about a true grassroots effort to fully salvage a Denny's restaurant in Auburn, New York. And as you'll hear from Dominic, it's an effort that began very slowly and then quickly sped up. And before we get to Dominic's presentation, there's just a couple of housekeeping details. We will keep this conversation to an hour, including the Q&A. So please go ahead and type your questions in the chat as we go along. We'll get to those at the end. If you prefer to unmute at the end and ask the question yourself, that's fine too. But in the meantime, please keep yourselves muted so everybody can hear Dominic's presentation. And also please consider registering for next month's Crowd Conversation on May 6th at 5 p.m. And we'll be hearing from university students on their final projects that are related to Crowd and the circular construction economy. So you can register at crowd.org to receive the Zoom link in advance. Also at crowd.org, you can sign up if you're not on our mailing list so you can receive Crowd announcements. So we have people joining us tonight from across New York State and beyond, but I'm based in Ithaca. So I would like to acknowledge that Ithaca is on the traditional homelands of the Cayuga, the Cayuga Nation. The Cayuga are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Ithaca, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of Cayuga dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Cayuga people, past and present, to these lands and waters. So our moderator tonight, Andrew Robley, is the president of Robley Historic Preservation, which is based in Auburn, New York. Andy holds an MA in Historic Preservation Planning from Cornell University and a BA in History from Wells College. Andy, like Dominic, lives in Auburn with his wife, Devin, and his 2 boys, Alex and Arthur. Andy has served on the City of Auburn Historic Resources Review Board and is the current president of the Preservation Association of Central New York, PACNY. Andy's also a founding partner of the Crowd Network. And so, Andy, thanks for being here to moderate, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Gretchen. Happy to be here and happy to welcome you all to this Crowd Conversation. I first came into contact with Dominic in November of 2022 when this whole saga began, and he contacted me as a member of Crowd to help him with his plan to deconstruct Denny's. Now, I didn't do much to help him. He did most of it on, 99% of it he did on his own. I was able to get him the name of the owner of the property. My contribution to the project ended there. So I'm happy to report that it was a success, which we'll hear about in a minute. I'll be keeping track of all the questions in the chat and moderating the discussion afterwards. So right now I'd like to give Dominic a little introduction here. Dominic embarked on his journey as a climate activist at the tender age of 8 years old in suburban Illinois. This is where he initiated efforts to reduce waste by recycling his neighbor's leftover paint and old electronics. Fast forward to 2019, he moved to Auburn for a theater opportunity and quickly became immersed in the local climate action movement and was one of the co-founders of Cayuga Climate Action. It's a grassroots organization that's dedicated to combating the climate crisis in Cayuga County. Drawing from his previous involvement in a reuse facility in Illinois, Dominic proposed the deconstruction of the soon-to-be demolished Denny's in Auburn. To his surprise, his request was approved, propelling Dominic and Cayuga Climate Action into the forefront of local advocacy for deconstruction and the reuse of building materials. When he's not engaged in deconstruction efforts, which I don't know when that is, because every time I run into him, he's transporting some piece of some other building somewhere else. But when he's not doing that, he is the executive assistant and the regrants coordinator at the Auburn Public Theater here in downtown Auburn. So with that, I'd like to introduce you all to Dominic and let him tell us the story of the Denny's project. Go ahead, Dominic.
Thank you so much, Andy. Again, I'm Dominic. I am from suburban Illinois, and this is the story of how I moved here and began a deconstruction pilot that has quickly blown up in the best possible way. So a little bit of backstory. I worked for SCARES in high school and college. SCARES stands for School and Community Assistance for Recycling and Composting Education. It is located in Addison, Illinois, and their main goal is to keep materials out of a landfill, and namely through school supplies and books. And the founder, Kay, was talking to me one day about how the sheriff of DuPage County let her and a couple of other senior employees go into a soon to be torn down hotel. It's actually being torn down to be rebuilt as condos. Anyway, they told me how filled the hotel was. This company had just up and left. And so that got me thinking. When I saw the Grant Avenue Denny's in the paper, it was going to be demolished. I one day was driving by, and you can see all the windows along the road there. The sun was hitting it just right where I could see through the blinds and saw all the tables, all the chairs, all the lights, and of course the blinds, and thought, you know what? They probably left everything. There's probably chinaware and silverware and all kinds of things. So I began to figure out who owns this building, because I wanted to make it my mission that this stuff will not be going to a landfill. So Andy, this is where Andy comes into play. He was very helpful in finding me the owner of the Denny's building. As soon as I'd contacted them, though, they let me know that the building was to be sold the following week. So I was not, they could not help me. And then they would not provide me anything but the name of the new company and the new owners of the property. So I immediately started doing a Google deep dive and found nothing except for a singular address in Georgia for this company that purchased this land in upstate New York. And I just wrote a letter. And that was in, I want to say late October, early November of 2022. And I heard nothing for months until I was working at a healthcare clinic at the time. My phone started ringing and I answered it. And it was the contractors saying they got the letter, they heard about what I was trying to do, and they had a couple of questions, but they were game for it. And I was thrilled. Then I asked how much time we have, and they said, "Oh, we're going to be up there tomorrow, so you have the next 3 days." So I had not called anybody else because my dream, if I had all the time in the world, was to go in with the contractor, see what was salvageable, take pictures, and spread the word that way. I had 3 days, so I immediately hung up with him and began to call nonprofit after local organization. And I called about 24 people in the span of 3 hours. I was very fortunate that it was a slow day at the healthcare clinic. So I called everyone I could think of, and everyone, because of the short time, they said, "Oh, we can't make it. If we had more time, we'd love to get a truck over there." And I said, "Well, we have the next 3 days." And a lot of people couldn't do that. So then I got maybe a dozen or half a dozen or so yeses. And I said, "All right, I'll see you tomorrow morning." So I kind of woke up not really knowing what to expect. I didn't know who was really coming. I had a couple of ideas, and it was one of those beautiful January days. This is now January 2023. So 2 months have gone by where I had heard nothing, had not been able to get anything in plan. It was one of those beautiful winter days where like the sun just warms everything up. And we were fortunate because the air conditioning was on in the building. So it was very cold in the building. And people just started to show up. And school district was kind of the first group that came in and really started to salvage everything. So you'll see here, uh, this is the interior of the Denny's. All those light fixtures you'll see above the bar, those went, the sign went, um, the countertop went, some of the tile went, all those chairs went. And I just, it all happened so fast. I actually was talking to one of the small businesses that came and they took the walk-in cooler, which is a $20,000 item, and they got it for completely free. So all these materials were for nonprofits, small businesses to take for free. And I was talking to him and he was walking me through and he goes, "Oh, the ceiling tiles, I took those from Denny's. You weren't there that day, but you had left. And I took the ceiling tiles and the lights that sit inside." So we were able to, because of all the community outreach and everyone showing up, we were about 60 to 80% of the building was stripped for salvage before the landfill. So a lot of things happened a lot happened so fast. Um, and it's how I actually met Auburn Public Theater and got connected because they came and took a bunch of tables, all the rest of the main dining room lights for their new cafe, and a lot of the chairs for their stage right space. And it was just amazing. It was an amazing process to see everything go. I mean, the school district came with a truck, took heating equipment, chairs, gone like that. Like half the dining room was cleared out. And then Auburn Public Theater came with a truck, cleared out the rest of the tables and chairs. So it was really cool to watch everyone show up and then in turn say, "Oh, I know someone who could use that," and call them and call them. And community was really uplifting community and we're helping each other out. They were saying, "Oh, you know what? I need half of these. You can take the other half." They were sharing, they were, helping because this is a form of, funding for them. It's free materials for their startup or nonprofit or small business. The people come all the way from Syracuse, the Salt City Market, and they came and they took materials, including another hot ticket item, an ONSEL system, which is a grease fire containment system that is mandated, in commercial kitchens in New York, and they came and took that for free. And that's another $20,000-$30,000 price tag item that they were able to get and salvage. So great, right? I was really excited, and then immediately began to realize, wow, this is one building that the company up and leaves and sells it, and then it gets demolished and something else gets put on this land. So this is just one restaurant, one building that I saved, and there's so much more that probably gets thrown out every single day in our country. So you start going down the rabbit hole a little bit, and you kind of downward spiral about, oh, there's so much to do, there's so much to save. How do we do it? So I thought of three challenges that I could approach the Auburn City Council and say, "Hi, we had a wonderful success. We saved a lot of items. We helped a lot of your small businesses and nonprofits. Here's ways that you can help us and ensure that this becomes a standard practice." So time is the first one because I had 3 days uh, in the blink of an eye with no kind of planning uh, set in motion. So, a lot of places could not come to take material because they couldn't get trucks or staffing. So time, ownership of these buildings is super important because I struggled for a couple of weeks trying to figure out who owns this building until I was connected with Andy, and I found out pretty quick. Andy knows a lot in that sector. So for a layperson like myself, a common citizen, figuring out who owns these buildings is super important because if you don't have a direct contact, like I'm writing a letter and snail mail, it delays everything. And then space. there's a lot of things that we couldn't salvage because there wasn't space. You know, taking a table is one thing, but taking the plumbing or taking the interior electrical work, that's something else. And so having these spaces to store this material that's salvageable and reusable until it can find its end destination and its recycled life is key and critical. So I met with City Council, and thanks to Crowd's help and Andy's help and having the county planner there, we drafted a deconstruction resolution for the city of Auburn, and I am so proud to announce that April 18th, City Council will be announcing it and voting on it. And thanks to all the work that we have done communicating with them and providing dialogue, I have no doubt in my mind that Auburn will be the first municipality in the state of New York to pass such a resolution. And again, the county planner again asked us to help draft deconstruction language for an updated solid waste municipal plan for the entire county. And then CETA got involved, the Cayuga Economic Development Agency, and they said, we love what you did for Denny's. We have somebody who's demolishing a 3-story antiques warehouse in Weedsport, New York, and they need you to clear out space so they can upgrade it and make it condos. So we were able to continue the work, do another project, get more data, get more people involved, and clear out yet another building that was slated for, you know, renovations or demolition. And through the process of doing this and kind of almost stumbling and you know, picking myself up and continuing to go, I've been very grateful at the response of the community, the response of the city council, as well as realize what needs to happen in order for a circular economy and deconstruction to become standard practice for any demolition or renovation project within a community. And so a lot of support needs to come from government, and a lot of support needs to come from the bottom up as well. So making these community connections and working with local non-for-profits and matching, you know, oh, these materials need to go here, having that kind of face-to-face connection and match, as well as the deconstruction resolutions from the government and, you know, permitting that expedites deconstruction, delays demolition, so that developers are encouraged to take stock of what they have and upcycle or reuse it instead of just taking a bulldozer or a wrecking ball and pushing everything into a landfill. And I think my experiences have illustrated that there is support, there is demand. This is something that helps our communities, that helps our local restaurants and small businesses and startups and non-for-profits. And so this is something that if we want to build a future that's lower waste than what we already have and optimizes reuse and deconstruction, then these are the steps that we have to take. And these are projects that we have to undertake as a community. And this is kind of the end of my story for right now. Obviously, we're still going, working with Crowd and, you know, continuing the work with the city of Auburn and the county. The solid waste plan is just finished its public comment period. So we had all of us in Cayuga Climate Action submit comments of support. And now, thanks to our work in solid waste reduction, we have a lot of other municipalities around the county, you know, looking to us to help them facilitate waste reduction strategies at a cross municipality scale. And with that, I will end my little presentation here, and I will let Andy, are you going to be sharing the questions, or am I going to just read them in the chat?
I will act as the interlocutor, and I will read the questions to you. At that point, you may respond to them.
Great, okay.
So we have our first question from Rebecca. She says, I remember there were landscape bushes outside. Did anyone get them?
No, and so that was another thing. For time, if we had more time, there was plenty of evergreens that could have been transplanted, rocks that could have been, collected for reuse. And that was one thing that if I had had more time, I would have immediately dug those up. Um, so fortunately, no, but hopefully the next time.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, if you'd like to ask your question, quote unquote, in person, raise your hand in the little bar at the bottom, and we'll get to you. The next question is also from Rebecca. Is there a way to be alerted to demolition permits being requested?
That's a great question because I would love for there to be a notification um, because I think everyone should be aware what is being demolished in their community. Everyone should be aware why things are being demolished and why deconstruction or reuse was not explored. Because there are legitimate reasons why you wouldn't want to deconstruct a building and maybe it's too far gone. Uh, so I do not know of any ways right now, except for finding out that, hey, a new car wash is opening up where the Denny's are and filling in the blanks of, oh, that means they're leveling it.
Yeah, typically it varies slightly from municipality to municipality, but um, generally it's not something where the municipality will put out an email alert or include in a newsletter all the demolition permits. So it requires a little bit of proaction on our part to learn these things. The next question is from Gretchen. Could you share a little background about the path to the deconstruction resolution being introduced in Auburn later this month? That is huge.
Absolutely. So I believe it was June of last year where we met. We had several departments of the city, including city councilors, we had the planning board from the uh, county present, and we had some of the department public works officers present. And we all just kind of sat down and Gretchen was present as well as another person from crowd, Jenny Minner. And we, CCA, we shared what worked for us, what didn't work for us, and how, again, like the time, who owns the buildings, and uh, uh, space to store material. We brought those points up, and we kind of just had a dialogue with our counselors and the planning board, especially, ensuring that any action taken by the city not only supports deconstruction, but continues to show support for economic development. Because there was a lot of concern from some members of the council and the planning board that, any flat out mandate or deconstruction ordinance has more legislative weight to it, would deter developers from picking properties within Auburn to redevelop, or renovate. Um, which there's definitely I I can see where the concern is, but like I said, these are deconstruction is an opportunity. It's not. It shouldn't be seen or viewed as red tape or you know withholding any development, because it really gives back to the community in ways that doesn't necessarily exist, and it's super sustainable and ensures that buildings that and materials that have already been manufactured and have that embodied carbon within them continue to have a life cycle until they are no longer usable. And so to kind of wrap that up, we had that kind of dialogue, and we both decided that a deconstruction resolution would be the best way to proceed. And Crowd drafted something for the city councilors to kind of adopt and make their own and apply to Auburn. And I think about a month and a half ago, we had the new mayor, who was present at that meeting as a councilor, and now he's the mayor, said, we're going to get this on the docket to be voted on. And now it's happening April 18th. So.
Yeah, I think it's a really, even though it's, as Dominic described, it's a non-binding resolution, it's symbolic, but the symbolism there is important because, it goes, it makes every other municipality in Auburn or in New York State 0 and Auburn a 1. So we immediately will differentiate ourselves from everybody else. And as an Auburnian, I'm all for that. And once we've taken that first step, then it's a matter of the slow wheels of progress heading us in the right direction. So it's really a big step. So let me get to the next question in the chat, and then we have somebody with their hand up. This is from Matt. How would you describe the current retail reuse environment in your area?
So there's Salvation Army, there's a rescue mission, Thrifty Shopper, and those are your standard Goodwill retail reuse stores. We do have, it's called So What, and they are a crafts and fabrics reuse facility. So that's really cool and unique to Auburn. And we have, it's called, gosh, I can't remember the, Shaver Brothers. And that is, they have home and building materials, windows, doors, all of that for reuse. And we initially reached out to them to see if they'd be interested in taking on more. And they said they're not interested. They're looking more towards reusing and reselling machinery, cranes, lifts like that. So yeah, I mean, there are a couple of antique places around as well, but nothing like Finger Lakes Reuse in Ithaca, which does a lot of home building material reuse and accepts a lot of that material that you replace the countertop and you can take it, if it's in good enough condition to be reused, you can take it there. Or same with cabinets or appliances, things like that. That's really the kind of facility you need to process these materials that come from a building renovation or deconstruction. And I think they're in the group and on the call, so I'm going to give them a shout out because they're awesome, and I'm a Shopper Rewards member there.
We have Dan with his hand up. Dan, would you like to unmute and ask a question?
Yeah. Dominic, this is really exciting to see this development in our area. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about the political process. I think you've already addressed it, but I'm just wondering if you have anything more to say about it. A lot of times when you suggest regulations like this, the people in positions of government or building departments will push back saying what you said, which was that this is going to deter development, it's going to raise the cost of doing this. And even people who want to see these measures implemented will often deter you from taking this approach because they feel like it's going to make too many political waves. And yet, if you look at the current set of building codes with regards to, say, energy efficiency, the only reason we have them is because they've been made laws. And you're effectively creating a law right there in Auburn around the circular economy. It just doesn't seem like it was, I mean, I know a lot went into this, but it just doesn't seem like it was that difficult to achieve this. It's pretty miraculous. And I'm just wondering, was there more going on in the political process that you haven't shared, or was this, a lot of upfront hard work and boom, next thing you know, you're on the track to getting this approved? It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Um, so I do want to add that I think because it's non-binding and it's just more of a acknowledgement of support from the council, it was a little bit easier to get this passed through. But I think also we did have I failed to mention we did have CETA present at that meeting in June of last year, and to have the Economic Development Agency for the county share, oh, we had a developer that wanted to do this because otherwise he'd have to pay to landfill all of this material. So to showcase that it's not necessarily a burden to development, it helps development because it reduces costs, legitimate costs, tipping fees and landfilling fees for a developer that is working on a site. So I think having that kind of economic development representative present as well and sharing and vouching for, um, idea of deconstruction really helps our planning board on the city level of government, see that it's, there is nothing to really be afraid of, and that this is a good first step in supporting a circular economy.
Yeah, that's really important. The fact that we really, by luck, had the right people involved who were educated about the circular economy and understood that it could be an assistant to economic development. I mean, you encounter the same thing in historic preservation, where people that are armed with the facts understand the reality, and then there's the great mass of people who have all sorts of mythology in their head about what it actually means. And it's our job. This is a big part of what our meeting was educating people about what it is we do and what we want and how we want to end up. So we didn't go from 0 to 60. It's not a full-fledged ordinance or regulation. There's no carrots and no sticks, essentially. But it is important in that at least the municipality is acknowledging its importance in an official way and signaling that it's ready to support it in a more meaningful way sometime in the future.
Yes, I would also like to add too that everyone upstate is aware of how our landfills were closing. Like within the next decade, most of two of the landfills where we send our waste as city will both be closed. So I think that has the kind of political pressure to ensure that we're looking at all the options of reducing waste, and deconstruction is such a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, to continue on that, I think it's important that the economic dimension is underlined and underlined and highlighted and underlined for people because, as Dominic pointed out, the city of Auburn was already paying something like $800,000 a year to send landfill materials outside of the city because our landfills maxed out. And now those landfills out beyond the city are reaching their own end of life. And so it will become increasingly more expensive and more of a burden on municipalities to transport that waste elsewhere and to deal with it in the way that we have been. So that's an important point to make. People, even if people are supportive, and Dan, you touched on this, even if they are supportive, if you can't demonstrate an economic benefit, you're not going to get very far in America with any argument you're trying to make. And that's, for better or worse, that is the way it is. So appreciate that question. So let me get back to the chat here. We have Rebecca. About how many businesses and other entities benefited from the Denny's opportunity? Were they mostly Auburn-based or located throughout the county?
Yes, I am doing the mental math. I want to say about 10 or 12 entities and businesses benefited. And the large ones were the school district, Auburn Bagel Co., Auburn Public Theater, um, and the Salt City Market, which is, for those who are not aware, it's a market with all different types of food. So it's kind of like little booths, and everyone rents the booth and maintains and owns that space, or rents or owns that space. And so we had several members from that come to grab, and that's probably the farthest that they could come from with Syracuse. And so, yes, I would say 90% of people who benefited were from Auburn, because it was, again, we had no time to really create a plan. It was grab what you want, you know, or you yeah, do whatever, just like kind of was a yes man. I was like, yeah, sure, take it. Yeah, sure, take it. Um, because we had that lack of time, it was kind of like, hey, I'm calling my friend and, this pizza guy and everyone in Auburn who could get in a car and get there within 20 minutes.
And these places that you mentioned, the Bagel Co. and the Salt City Market in particular, these are not places that you would imagine would have, quote unquote, hand-me-down materials. These are slick, pretty fancy establishments. So
yeah,
and this kind of goes to a comment that Rebecca also made, where she says, I'm imagining that the beneficiaries could be asked to be more vocal about facilitating deconstruction. Now, if people knew that these slick, fancy places were using these fixtures and appliances, it probably would go a long way to advancing our cause. I have a question. I have a couple questions here. First, I'm curious if you could tell us what percentage of Denny's salvage was building materials versus purely fixtures like furniture and appliances, so forth.
yeah. It'll be a rough estimate because we didn't really, that was one thing that I wish we could have done, was a material or inventory material, so we knew exactly, what was taken and where, because it was kind of like, oh, I'm with the school district, and then they just like, all of a sudden I didn't see them, and I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure they took, I mean, I know they took chairs and stuff, but and the 3-bay fridge, but they took heating equipment from the roof, and I was not a part of that. I just was like, sure, they took the heating equipment. I would say 60-40. 60% was the fixtures, things that were easily removable, and then 40% would be the building materials. So the trim, a lot of the trim was salvaged, switch plates, covers. I salvaged those. The hostess window, there was a little half wall with a window. I took that down to Ithaca. So that was kind of a building fixture. And ceiling tiles, some of the lights, those were taken. But if we had more time, I would have loved to have taken down, all of the ductwork and all of the workings of the plumbing and the electric, so that we could have either recycled it for the metal value or reuse it.
We have a question from Tirsa Brick and Mortar Design.
Mhm.
Was all the materials and equipment taken removed by the folks taking materials, or were contractors involved?
Oh, that's a great question. So we had the company that owned the building sent out their contractor, Paul, and he sat there and was kind of the safety person. But everything was taken out by the people who wanted the material. So Paul was there to make sure, oh, if you want those lights, let me go, shut that down so you don't get electrocuted. But it was volunteers of these organizations showing up and grabbing the material. And Paul was there just for insurance safety reasons and whatnot.
Dominic,
I guess I would like to add that it could go either way. Like if you were a contractor considering um or a developer considering a deconstruction project, you could, you know, dismantle everything and then offer it up to the public and say, "Hell, here in this corner of the building or this corner of the parking lot, come grab it," instead of letting people come in and do it themselves. But this was such a, again, quick turnaround project that it was kind of all hands on deck to make sure. Yeah.
if you had a truck, you could go get a bunch of free stuff, drive it somewhere else and sell it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. So uh, Dan asks, and it looks like most of the people who took the materials actually used the materials. Yes?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I haven't seen it all in action, but because there was a soup kitchen that took, tubs and stuff and things for cooking. But like going into Tony's bagel shop last week and seeing, the booths and the tables and walk-in cooler and ceiling tiles and, the paper towel dispensers. It was really, really cool. But everyone who took things used them for their intended purpose.
Hey, Dominic, do you know if Tony is going to have any acknowledgement of where it came from or how it was procured at all?
Yeah, I know he has already mentioned it when they put the cooler in, the walk-in cooler, on his Instagram. Um, but I'll make sure as soon as, he's getting ready for a soft open. And if Citizen covers it, which is our local newspaper, I'll make sure I tell Tony to give the efforts a shout out and give Denny's a shout out and CCA and City of Auburn for hopefully by then, adopting the resolution.
Okay, we have a question from Chris Skowski, apologies, from Clean Energy Communities. Can you expand on, quote, safety person? I have run into insurance concerns on other projects that involve volunteers, deconstruction, and material removal.
Yeah, absolutely. So Paul was the site manager for the demolition. So that was what his job was. He was hired to oversee it. And so he walked around, turned lights on for us. He helped us, safely disconnect materials like the lighting fixtures and the fridges and the onsel system, because obviously you could set it off and then you have to, it's not worth it. Once you set it off, it's like um you don't want to do that, then you have to get a new one. So he made sure all of that was safely dismantled and assisted. um but a lot of the materials like the heating equipment on the roof, that was the school district and their uh contractors and staff. So they were, there's educated people that were helping facilitate this in a safe manner. And, their only insurance concerns were, you know, be safe, like wear closed-toed shoes, like, you know, you have to have permission before you take anything from that site manager. And they just wanted to make sure we wouldn't, if there were any incidents or injuries that we would not sue. Which I was like, yeah, sure, we're not going to sue. I just want the stuff. Um,
So
so
you
hopefully that answers your question, Chris, a little bit better.
so you were basically at the mercy of the kindness and trust of the property owner, which
Absolutely.
which I
Yes.
imagine will vary from property owner to property owner.
Yeah. And it's, it would have been, I feel like it would have been an easier conversation if we had, oh, you have this amount of materials. Here's who's interested, and then facilitated that way, versus this all kind of like hands on deck, take whatever, get out. So there's definitely ways to, when you talk to site managers of developing and contractors and owners, there's ways to put their fears at ease and say, there's a way to do this safely and timely, and you just have to open that conversation up. And hopefully, the end goal obviously is to have, everyone does deconstruction. It's just not even a second thought, so that there's processes to do this.
Gretchen asks, did you have to sign any waivers?
No, just my verbal. They were good to go. Because the Paul was there, the site manager.
Okay. And Rebecca's asking for you to clarify who hired the site manager specifically.
That was the owner of the New Potato Creek Holdings LLC. That was the LLC that hired him.
We have a comment from Melissa Wenzel from MPCA. I'm sorry, I don't know what that stands for. She says, I'm a statewide sustainable built environment administrator. Oh, it's the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Thank you, Melissa. She says, I'm a statewide sustainable built environment administrator and will say that the more that initiatives and successes happen locally, that'll help statewide leaders to push for similar statewide initiatives. No question, just wanted to throw out that comment. Keep doing great work. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes, thank you, Melissa.
Dominic, what do you think is the most important lesson you've learned that you would share with others who are, as you put it, just normal citizens like yourself?
Definitely you have to be, I guess, a little aggressive. Making sure, oh, there's no email or there's no phone number. Okay, write a letter. Um, you know, just kind of, if you wanted to see it happen, you have to keep contacting them, keep the pressure up, and what the same goes with the city council. Mentioning to them. I mean, they just had the state of the city and the county at the theater, and every person I saw, I was like, hey, what's the status of the deconstruction? Like, oh, you just announced this project. How's deconstruction going to happen? Um, just kind of keeping the fire lit and fostering the community. I mean, if you know somebody who will use something, say, hey, I know this person could use kitchen equipment. This restaurant's being demolished, or they're, you know, going out of business. Like, just asking the questions and kind of keeping the fires lit and fostering that community.
Yeah, you got to make it happen. Okay, we're going to take one more question because we're headed towards 6 o'clock. This is from Dan. He asks, are you looking into ways to improve upon the deconstruction process? Will the next one be more efficient? And will the city be working with you to make improvements?
The questions. I'm definitely looking for ways to make this process happen easier and more efficient than just, you know, cold calling people and hoping they show up. Um, the city, once they approve this resolution, I definitely want to reopen the conversation of how they can ensure that the resolution is just the first step and not, we're done, we did it, you know. There's no, there's no concrete plans as of right now. There's no concrete plans for another deconstruction to happen. There's definitely projects that I've been keeping an eye on, keeping my ears alerted, so that if there's this opportunity that I take what I've learned and what I've the experiences I've gained, and be able to move forward and make it happen again.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Dominic, for sharing with us your experience with Denny's and for so eloquently representing Auburn. And I'd also like to just check in with Gretchen and see if she wants to say anything as we wrap up. Gretchen.
Thank you. Thanks, Dominic. Thanks, Andy, for all your hard work in Auburn. It's really, really exciting. And I would just encourage anyone on the call to please consider signing up for our May crowd conversations. That will be the last one before we break for the summer and then resume them in the fall. So if you missed it earlier, our final May crowd conversations are students in their final year of either a master's degree or an undergrad bachelor's degree who will be presenting their final projects around deconstruction, around circular economies. So please tune in for that next month, May 6th, 5 p.m. And you can sign up at our website, crowd.org. So thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Thank you, Andy, for moderating. Thank you, Dominic, for great presentation and fabulous work. And hope to see you all next month. Thanks, everybody.